The wars you see on TV are smoke. The real battles are silent, invisible, and already happening under your feet. Every time you turn a car key, charge a phone, or switch on a light, you're stepping into a global battlefield where oil, gold, and lithium decide who eats and who collapses. This story isn't about politics. It's about control. Welcome to AssetNova, where money, power, and history leave their fingerprints. For thousands of years, empires were built on one brutal rule: whoever controls the resources controls the future. The Romans didn't conquer Europe for glory. They wanted gold mines in Spain. The British Empire didn't rule the seas for pride. They were hunting coal, rubber, and oil to fuel factories and ships. But the modern war is different. It doesn't start with bombs. It starts with contracts, loans, development deals, and smiling handshakes. Let's start with oil. Black liquid. Thick, dirty, but worth more than blood. In the early 1900s, Britain realized coal was dying. So they quietly bought oil fields in Persia, today's Iran. They didn't send armies at first. They sent engineers. By the time Iran understood the trap, Britain already owned the pump. When Iran tried to take it back in 1951, the government was overthrown. Not by tanks, but by money, spies, and broken promises. This wasn't a war for land. It was a war for the tap. Now gold. You think gold is about jewelry and savings. It's not. Gold is trust when paper lies. During every crisis, rich nations hoard gold like oxygen. In 1968, when the US dollar was cracking, France literally sent warships to America to collect gold instead of paper. Imagine that. Naval ships collecting metal because they no longer trusted money. Africa has enough gold to make every citizen wealthy. But instead, foreign companies own the mines, governments drown in debt, and local workers die underground for wages that won't buy dinner. The countries are rich. The people are poor. That's not failure. That's design. Now comes lithium, the new king. This isn't yesterday's oil. This is tomorrow's power. Every electric car, every smartphone, every battery that stores solar energy needs lithium. And most of it is buried under deserts in Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina. They call it the lithium triangle. But triangles aren't shapes of safety. They're shapes of traps. These countries were promised green wealth. What they got were contracts written in languages their own ministers didn't understand. Cheap exports, expensive imports. Their salt flats are drying up. Their water is disappearing. Their future is being shipped overseas in shipping containers labeled clean energy. Here's the hidden twist. These resource wars are no longer fought by soldiers. They're fought by spreadsheets, by debt, by currency, by development loans that never get repaid because they were never meant to be. This is how it works. A poor country discovers oil or lithium. Banks rush in with billions in loans to build infrastructure. The country borrows. Projects run late. Costs explode. Prices fall. The debt stays. And suddenly, the only way to pay is to sell the resource rights. Cheap. Forever. That's not investment. That's foreclosure on a nation. And the scariest part, the richest countries on Earth are now terrified of losing this system. Because once resources are gone, power goes with them. That's why you see new bases in deserts, new partnerships, new peace missions in places with old mines. Oil built the last century. Gold stabilized every collapse. Lithium will decide the next 50 years. So when someone tells you wars are about religion, ideology, or freedom, remember this. Nobody dies over ideas. They die over control of what the world can't live without. And now the question comes to you. Not as a citizen, but as an investor in your own survival. Are you holding paper promises or pieces of the real world? You don't lose control when tanks roll in. You lose control when your map gets redrawn by people you'll never meet. Because after oil, gold, and lithium comes the most dangerous resource of all, water. No oil field can save you if your rivers are dry. In 2011, Syria didn't fall apart because of ideology. It cracked after the worst drought in its modern history. Farms collapsed. Families flooded cities. Food prices exploded. Protests followed. Then war. The headlines blamed politics. The real trigger was empty wells. Now look at India, China, and Pakistan. 3 nuclear powers. 1 shrinking water system, the Himalayas. These glaciers feed rivers that support nearly 2 billion people. But the ice is melting fast. When those rivers weaken, borders don't matter. Hunger doesn't stop at checkpoints. Here's the shock. In the next 25 years, the biggest conflicts won't be about oil. They'll be about drinking water. Now flip the story. You think rich countries are safe? Think again. In California, farmers pump groundwater faster than it can refill. The land is literally sinking. In some areas, the earth has dropped over 10 feet. That's not climate change. That's extraction addiction. And while the world is fighting over water, something even darker is happening quietly behind the scenes. Farmland is being bought like tech stocks. China is buying fields in Africa. The Middle East is buying farmland in Europe. Billionaires are buying thousands of acres in America. Not to farm today, to own food tomorrow. Because when food gets scarce, it won't be the strongest who survive. It will be the ones who control the soil. Here's a story they don't teach in school. During World War II, Japan didn't attack Southeast Asia for pride. They attacked for rubber. Tires. Tanks don't move without rubber. Planes don't land without rubber. They lost the war, but they understood something brutal. No resources, no nation. And now the same logic is playing out again. Only this time, it's happening in boardrooms instead of bunkers. The scary truth. You don't see the war until your cost of living explodes, your savings shrink, and your children ask why everything costs more than it did last year. This isn't inflation. This is the price of losing control over the foundations of civilization. So when headlines scream about elections, scandals, or celebrities, remember, the real story is underground, underwater, and under your feet. You don't feel collapse when it happens. You feel it when your lifestyle quietly disappears. Because after water and farmland, the next battlefield is something so small you never think about it until it's gone: rare earth metals. Your phone, your TV, your car, your wind turbines, even your military weapons. None of them work without rare earths. There are only 17 of these elements, but without them, modern life shuts down. Here's the trap. Over 80% of the world's rare earth processing happens in one country, China. Not because others don't have the minerals, but because China learned the real game. They don't mine. They refine. Mining is dirty. Refining is power. In 2010, a tiny fishing dispute between China and Japan exploded into a global panic. China quietly restricted rare earth exports. Within weeks, Japanese factories were frozen. Car production slowed. Electronics companies bled billions. No bombs. No speeches. Just paperwork. That was the warning shot. Since then, the world has tried to catch up. The US reopened old mines. Europe launched supply programs. But here's the truth nobody admits. Building a refining industry takes decades, not elections. And the waste is toxic. No country wants the poison, but everyone wants the power. Now let's twist the knife deeper. During the pandemic, container shipping costs exploded by over 400%. Companies learned the hard way that just-in-time supply chains are just in time for disaster. Entire industries were one missing shipment away from collapse. That's when governments realized something terrifying. Globalization made them efficient, but helpless. So now they're reshoring factories, stockpiling metals, locking in long-term contracts with unstable countries, and calling it national security. But behind closed doors, they call it what it is: panic buying for the future. Because the next global crash won't start in a bank. It will start when one invisible material disappears from the pipeline. You don't need to fear war. You need to fear silence when the factories stop without a headline. And the final punch. Most people still think money is the system. It isn't. Money is just the receipt. Resources are the real balance sheet of civilization. If you don't know which materials your life depends on, you're not prepared. You're exposed.